So welcome back, everybody, to round two of the symposium. At this point, we're going to transition into the sport agency realm. It's great to hear from Christy Dosh with respect to name, image, likeness, but at this point, we're going to be learning from Brandon Curran. He's all the way from Los Angeles, California today. So Brandon has double majored in business administration and communications and media from the University of California, Berkeley. He has completed multiple internships with companies such as Creative Arts Agency, CBS Interactive, IMG, and the Wasserman Group. Brandon is currently the Vice President of NBA Player Marketing and Business Development at Catalyst Sport and Media and is the founder of Social Chair. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. Perfect. Appreciate you all having me. So I'll kind of just start with my journey, where I'm at, what it's like to work at a sports agency, and then I can kind of dive backwards into how I got where I am. So I'll try to keep this as real world as possible. So my job is I work at an NBA sports agency. It's in the space. It's what you'd be called a boutique, and a boutique means you focus on one sport. So we focus on NBA basketball. There's a reason I really like the NBA basketball space compared to the NFL and MLB. Those are what you call like the four major sports in the U.S. market are hockey, MLB, NFL, NBA. In terms of popularity, obviously the NFL is most popular, but actually from a player standpoint, which I'll kind of dive into more, the NBA to me is the best one to be in the agency space for. And the reason why is each sport has a different players association. So you've probably heard of the NBPA, the MLBPA, and the NFLPA. The NBPA and the MLPA are very, very good at what they do. And when I mean that, I mean in terms of negotiating their collective bargaining agreement. And there's historical precedent to that, like goes way back before like free agency was not allowed in sports before, like there was like a 1970s case, which you probably know a lot more about, but that's kind of where it started. And where the NBA has really gotten is you kind of take a look at the leagues. The NFL's got like 1,800 players. The MLB's got whatever 25 times 30 is. And then the NBA has only 450. So from opportunity perspective, I could be the best offensive lineman in the NFL and I can walk down the street and people won't know my name. But if you're a top player in basketball or even a good role player, like think of like a Danny Green or like a PJ Tucker, like these aren't stars in the NBA, but they're very well known just because of the platform they're given. And there's only 15 guys on an NBA team. Also, additionally, how the leagues really approach branding and player marketing is really unique. So I would say I'm personally not a big fan of the NFL for kind of a number of reasons, but one being that they really don't allow their players to have multiple identities. And it's kind of tough for the NFL because the nature of those careers are like two to 3 years. So if I only have 2 to 3 years to work with a guy and brand him, I really can't get into, oh, what his likes, his dislikes, his personality. Like you don't really have time for that. And the NFL, they're known for promoting what they call as the shield. So the teams, the league as a whole, they don't really go, they have those tentpole players like your Patrick Mahomes and stuff. But outside of that, they really don't get too in the weeds on that. The NBA, what's really nice is the average career is like 4 years, but can go on way longer. I would say probably around like 10 years. And that really gives a guy an opportunity to get known in the marketplace. So from that, you're really able to build out a brand for a guy. And what's nice is the NBA players, if any of you guys are, obviously everyone who's on social media, if you ever take a look at guys who are not only in the league, but coming up, it's pretty insane to see like the top NFL guy would be like the 15th or 20th person in terms of the NBA. Like there's NBA players coming up, like LaMelo Ball, kind of a unique situation. I think he has like 5 or 6 million followers on Instagram. That's probably more than 99.9% of the NFL. There's guys coming up like a Mikey Williams who was blown up on social media since from a young age because he was playing with Bronny James. He has, I think, over 2 or 3 million followers on Instagram. And like when you have that amount of reach at such a young age, you're really able to build a brand. And that's what's really exciting about NIL for players in those situations is because you have this captive audience, you can go out to a brand and work. But kind of back to what I said about how the agency space works. So not to get super technical, but if you're an MLB agent, you take 5% of someone's playing contract, which sounds great because it's, oh, Bryce Harper signs, $300 million deal, 5% of that. Again, I'm not here for math, but I think it's a good amount of money. But regardless, what's really hard about baseball, and it's kind of, you have to learn these things about each sport, is baseball, I sign a client at 18. I'm paying for him to be in the minor leagues. You're not taking any percentage off them in the minor leagues just because they're making so little money. And then for baseball, once they do get called up, they're on a set salary. And then the only time that they actually get paid will be when they're arbitration eligible. So that usually happens like 3 to 4 years into their career. Arbitrations where you basically, the agent goes to the team and then they're like, okay, the team's like, okay, we think you're worth X. And then the agent's like, oh, we think you're worth this. It never goes to trial. They always kind of figure it out ahead of time. But that's the first time you get paid. And that can occur 7 or 8 years after you sign somebody. So that's what a lot of people don't know about the sports agency world is you see these players getting drafted. Oh, they're going to make money off that. No, so that's how baseball works. Football has really gotten pretty bad, to be honest. So it used to be 3%, and now it's up to 3%. So which is like it sounds like a small difference, but it's actually a huge difference. So let's say I'm signing you to be my NFL client. It used to be, standard rate is 3%. Now I have to upsell you to 3%. And a lot of agents are going under that. Oh, he's 3%. Oh, they'll charge me 2% or 1%. And now everyone's kind of undercutting themselves. And then take away that the contracts aren't guaranteed in football. And then on top of that, the football players get injured and their average career is 2 to 3 years. Football is a very, very hard sport to make. I'm sure you saw that article recently where the NFL agent who's had some big guys, he just came out, he's like, this isn't a sustainable career. Like you're just losing so much money and there's like so much risk involved. And then from the basketball perspective, this is why I'm a fan of basketball. Now basketball is the hardest. Like the MLB draft is, I don't know how many rounds, it's so many rounds. And then the NFL draft is I think like 6 or I don't know, it's more. The NBA draft is 2 rounds and they take 60 guys. If you get drafted in the first round, you're going to get a guaranteed contract, which is great. And then NFL agents take 4%. Now, again, even with the NBA agents take 4%. Now, even with the NBA, this 4% rate that you're going to take, that's not on the first deal. So I sign you, let's say I sign him, 18 years old, I got to pay for his pre-draft training. That's usually around 100 grand. So 100 grand in the hole. And then, I'm not saying this happens, but if he has somebody on his team who wants to steer me to a certain agent, people do have to pay that. So now, you're in the hole for that money too. It's usually structured as like a marketing advance. So let's say I think you'll bring in $2 million in marketing. I'll give you an upfront amount. And then as you make that, you pay me back. But even from there, let's say we keep going. Now, if you're a top guy, you'll get a good shoe deal with like a Nike or someone big like that. That's when I can actually recoup money. But if you're not a top guy and there's not as many top shoe deals out there anymore because it's kind of oversaturated at the point and most guys are going to wear Nike anyway, so you don't need to be signing them. So let's say you play like 3 years, great. Then you're eligible for your second contract. But on the first one, you'll get, wherever you get drafted, it's a slotted agreement. So let's say if you guys want to Google just like 2021 NBA first round pick contracts, they'll give you a number there. And that's the 100% number. Only thing an agent can do is negotiate 80% of that number, which obviously you're not going to do that, or 120% of that number. When you do the 120%, you're only entitled to get 4% of the difference between the original amount and what you negotiated. So you're really not going to make much. So for the first 4 years of an MBA client, outside of the marketing, don't expect to make any money. So your job in those 4 years, and a lot of agents don't even try to commission their guys those years because they're just trying to keep them around for the second contract. And that's when the MBA agent world is actually like probably the best. If you can hold a guy for those 4 years, which can be challenging, then you could sign that big deal. And now what you're seeing with guys nowadays, just because the max salary is going up, you'll see guys that are they're signing like 5 years, $200 million deal. That's $40 million a year. You do 4% of that. Again, the math eludes me, but I think that's like $1.6 million a year in commission. That's actually something that you can live off. And so that's why I'm personally biased towards the MBA agency realm. But again, there's not that many guys that are getting drafted each year. So it's a very small quantity. And it's only 450 guys in the league. There's guys constantly coming in. There's guys constantly coming out. My role, so that's the player agent world. Very hyper competitive. You have to be able to sleep knowing somebody's trying to steal your client all times of the day. Anyone can be reached now pretty easily. Either that's through like, oh, I know your teammate, can you introduce me to that player? I'll be his agent. Or, oh, I'll just DM you. Or I'll find other ways to get in contact with you. Like there was a case that came out. there's a case that came out a few months ago where a player actually met somebody at a teammate's birthday party, and his agent was there celebrating his birthday, and then you're going to overcross like that. So it really is the kind of job where you kind of always have to just honestly be trusting in your relationship and feel like you have that deep connection with the guy. My job is the player marketing standpoint. So if you don't have relationships with players, and I grew up in Los Angeles playing basketball, but I didn't make any relationships with players. So I didn't really have these connections into an agency. So the next best thing I could do, which unless anyone here knows any like soon to be professional basketball players or athletes, if you do, congratulations. That'll help your life a little bit. But if you don't, and you're like me, the best route that you can go is you're just going to have to network and do internship after internship after internship. So I'll kind of go into my journey a little bit there. So as I said, grew up in LA. I went to UC Berkeley I double majored in their business school and then media studies. They're not known for their sports programs or having any sports programs like this. So I would say you guys are very lucky in this sense. So I just started working for the Cal Athletics Department. They literally sent an email, hey, do you want to buy student tickets? And on the side, it had to add, do you want to be a sports marketing intern? I was like, oh, that sounds like something I should be doing. So I applied to that. I would work game days. That led to something with the Golden State Warriors. And this is kind of the thing where you always want to be talking and networking and seeing what opportunities are out there. So during the nights during the week, I would go down to Oracle Arena, which was in Oakland at the time, and I would work game operations for the Golden State Warriors. This was by far not a glamorous job, but honestly, to me at that point, if I got a polo and a credential, it was all I needed as a job, which is still cool these days. But then going from there, I was paid $40 a game, but I had to pay $5 for the bar, and then I would have to eat dinner at the game, which was a hot dog. I'm netting $30 after this game. Honestly, that's great to even be paid for some of these internships. I think the world has changed a little bit where you can't be doing these unpaid internships anymore unless you're getting academic credit. So things might be a little easier for you, but started working for them. And then I got my first agency break when I applied for an internship at CAA in their sports group. I don't know how many of you are familiar with CAA. They're the largest talent and sports agency out there. So they represent like Steven Spielberg, Leonardo DiCaprio, Oprah, all those big names. And then in 2006, they did what's called an agency roll-up, where they basically launched their sports group and they acquired a bunch of other agencies. The history of that's actually really interesting. Is basically there was this one original agency, IMG, which had everybody, and they were starting like the 60s to be like Arnold Palmer's agent. And then they fired one of the agents. It was like Casey Close, Tom Condon, who's like the big NFL quarterback agent. And then someone else, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was interesting because they fired one of these people, but they had a key man clause in their contract. And key man clause says, if I fire you, then I could take these people with me after I left. So basically, IMG decided at that point, like, hey, we're going to get out of the player representation space. Like, we're going to focus more so on the events and the sponsorships and the media rights. That led to the creation of CAA Sports, which became the largest agency now, probably has over like 500 or 600 clients across baseball, basketball, football, hockey, tennis, golf. There is what you call like a mega agency. So someone that has a representation across multiple sports. The other mega agencies are Wasserman, Excel. I used to work on one called Relativity Sports, which was big. So it kind of varies in that sense. But this was my first agency experience. I was 19, and to be honest, I was not a good intern in retrospect. Like I remember I fell asleep in some meetings. I was 19. I was not sleeping enough. And but I learned, and like some of the key takeaways from that was like it was very interesting. Right, it was like the highest thing they stressed to us was write handwritten thank you notes, which I've never even thought about up until then. But when you think about now, and especially where we are now in like the digital age, I encourage everyone here to write a handwritten thank you note, not only because it's a nice gesture, but if you just think about like the process of it. Oh, I write it, I mail it, I receive it, it's on my desk, I have it there. Oh, I'm constantly just seeing something. There's everybody who's interacting with me on LinkedIn and on the screens and stuff. And then there's the one person who wrote a handwritten, tangible thank you note. So that's kind of a really good takeaway I had from there. Then I started doing, and at this point, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing sports agency internships, which in retrospect was not the best idea, but I can get to that later. But essentially from there, I worked for IMG college, so kind of doing sponsorship stuff. So essentially schools like Florida, they have sponsors, like, as you know, team sponsors and stuff, and then they have someone who does these activations. So that's actually, you know, me and you might negotiate it, but someone has to actually make sure it happens. And you have to like do a recap of it and share it with the sponsor. So I was working in that space. And then before my senior year, I did an internship at CBS Interactive, which was actually really cool. It was in San Francisco, and it was not in sports. And this is where I would say my biggest regret in my professional life is I did too many agency specific internships within the sports realm. And that was in my mind, oh, I want to work at agency. Let me do 3. Well, 4 is better than 3. 5 is better than 4. But then in retrospect, when I'm trying to get hired by an agency, it's not really a value to be like, hey, I used to work for your competitor. Do you want an introduction to them? No, I already know that. They try to steal my clients. Why would I ever want to talk to them? So that's something I've always wanted to. I wish I diversified into working at a brand that gets involved in sports, working at a players union, working at a league, just working at somewhere where I can bring some value to the agency was really helpful. And then kind of fast forward, I did an internship at Wasserman too. And that was a good experience. And then kind of cool, I applied to be the assistant to the CEO at the company that was called Relativity Media, which was like a mini major movie studio. They produced movies like Limitless, Masterminds, other movies like that. And I didn't get it. And then they told me in the HR, they were like, oh yeah, this was great, but we'll keep your resume on file. I'm sure everyone here has heard that and knows that means we're never going to talk to you again. This actually wasn't true. They actually did keep my resume on file. This woman in HR really connected with, and again, I made sure to maintain a relationship with her. So, hey, if I started a new job, or if I did something, or if I had a side project go live, or if I wrote a blog, just chime in, hey, hope you're doing well. Here's what I've been working on, because you just want to stay top of mind with people. And a lot of things in life is just being top of mind when an opportunity presents itself. Like, let's say I'm a brand and, oh, wow, I now have a budget to do something. My whole goal with these companies is to have our players be top of mind for that. So they called me back in July that year, so it was like 5 months, and then they're like, oh, we actually have a job to be the second assistant to Happy Walters. And I was like, oh, this is great. I already know who Happy Walters is. I've never been an assistant before. All I know about being an assistant is what I've seen on Entourage with Lloyd, which is very accurate to what my job was. And that was honestly, it was a really good teaching moment, because when you're an assistant, you realize like your first client is your boss. I have one client, that's my boss. And what you kind of learn being an assistant is like, you can't just assume everything's going to happen A to B. You have to make sure A to B happens, but C, D, E, and F don't as well. So you can't just do something and hope it works out for the best. You need to make sure every other thing. And this is from everything from like just getting a reservation at lunch, getting dinner reservations, scheduling meetings, just answering the phone correctly, making sure the right people are being connected through. There were times when people called me like, oh, I know Happy. And my boss's name was Happy Walters, which is interesting. He actually was good friends with Adam Sandler growing up. So that's where the Happy Gilmore comes from, Happy Walters. So kind of interesting connection there. But you'd have to actually take care of these things, and you learn on the job, but there's a lot of times when you would screw up. And I tell this to my intern today, it's like, no one's going to be mad at you for screwing up, but just learn from your mistakes, because it's fine if you screw up, everyone screws up, but don't keep repeating the same mistake, because then you're not really engaged, you're not really paying attention and learning. So this time as assistant was, I would say, like very interesting. I mean, I had to get his coffee every day. I still have his Starbucks order memorized in my head, a venti skinny vanilla latte with an extra shot. Like these are the kind of things that you just have to be wired to. But what I realized is it really made me a better employee, because you take care of everything. And when eventually I would work with players, I would take this same mentality. Instead of having one client who's my boss, I have like 10 NBA guys who I now work with. So within this experience, I had an epiphany early on, and I kind of suggest this to everyone here, is develop hard quantitative skills. When I say that, I mean, learn how to build PowerPoints, learn Canva, learn Excel, learn Photoshop. That's when you were talking about all those skills. These are things that I've actively looked for our players. I can't do video editing. I'm not going to learn how to do video editing. All this stuff, these are very valuable that will get you in and get you to kind of build out your body of work. So what you really want to do is kind of create a moat around yourself in the terms of like, because like one day you'll be an assistant, you'll be 22, 23, everything will be great, but then the next day you'll be 25 and you're like, I don't want to be an assistant anymore. How are you going to protect against another 22-year-old who will will get paid for nothing, is super excited to just be answering phone. So you really need to build out the skill set to kind of protect yourself. So I had that epiphany. I was like, damn, if I got fired today, I would have to restart somewhere as someone else's assistant. And I really don't want to do that. So I basically started teaching myself PowerPoint, started teaching myself Excel. PowerPoint was really cool because previously we were using a design agency to do all of our recruiting presentations. Design agencies are not good for a variety of reasons. One, I'll be like, hey, can you sub out this photo? And they'll be like, yeah, that's $500 and you'll get it in 1 to 2 weeks. And it's like, we have a recruiting meeting like the next day. So I learned to just kind of do the PowerPoints on my own. And what was cool about this is, yes, I was doing my job as an assistant, but I also started to know, oh, who were we recruiting? And I started to also work with our players directly. And then you kind of in the flow of information, and then you're making yourself like an essential employee where it's like, oh, wow, yeah, we need to recruit. Oh, so then we need someone to build those presentations. And that's going to be Brandon because he's doing it way faster than those design agency people. And then another thing I did, which I really suggest is just in general for any career, but specifically sports, is be very well read about the space. There's a lot of great resources. All of you are in college, so Sports Business Journal is available to you at like, I think like $50 for the semester, which is great because it's not for us. It's like extremely expensive. I think it's like $3,000 or something, but it is actually super expensive. But when you kind of read the trades of, and then this is for whatever industry you want to work in, when you read the trades, you may not understand like what you're reading, like an RSN, like media rights deal or like whatever this means, but you're going to learn the terms and you're going to Google it. And you're not only going to be able to understand it, but then when you're in interviews, you're going to be able to talk and be able to hold your own in a conversation where it's a point where it's like, oh, okay, this person actually does know what's going on in sports. They're not just here because they have been playing sports since they were 6 years old. Side note, if someone asks you why you want to work in sports, don't say because you've been playing your whole life or you love sports. Everyone loves sports. We hear this all the time. It's really, you're blowing a really good opportunity to separate yourself because knowing everyone does say that, you can say something that's completely different. And that's kind of your why and why you want to work in it. But from there, you kind of just need, I just kept building it. And then I started writing these articles. So I would read all these articles and then I would start sending them to my boss. And he originally was like, just send me interesting articles. But I started to analyze them because I wanted to show that, hey, I'm not just a guy who answers the phone and gets Starbucks. I can actually like think about things. And get Starbucks, not screw up the order. But from there, I kept kind of building it, and he would slowly add people. And then at one point, he emailed the whole sports group, which at the time was like 100 people, and he's like, hey, going forward, Brandon's going to be sending you these articles. So every Monday, I would stay at the office till like 12 at night and just like collect all the articles and then analyze them. And then I would send it out. And what was really cool about it is like, here I am, like 22, 23 years old, and I'm telling like 100 people who are all older than me and more experienced, here's what the major news is, here's why it matters. And it really helped get me a lot of exposure within the company and build a lot of good, unique relationships. From there, it got really interesting. So how deep should I go into this?
Keep going, you're doing great.
Okay, all right. So from there, and this was May 2015, we had one of the best NFL football classes. So there was this agent at CAA who left named Ben Dogra. He came over to join. He represented like Richard Sherman, Adrian Peterson, AJ Green. So he was a really big guy. So after we got him and then we kind of combined our recruiting classes, we had 3 of the top 7 picks in the 2015 draft. And then like 6 guys go in the first round. So that was like, oh man, like here's where our model's working. We're like this large agency. But then unfortunately, the media side of our agency, so we were connected to like an independent movie studio called Relativity Media. We were Relativity Sports. That studio came up, they took on a lot of debt and then they stopped producing quality movies that weren't doing well at the box office. So then they had to go into Chapter 11. So we went from May, we were like the top, like on the heels of CAA as the top agency, to July having to explain to our clients like, hey, here's what a Chapter 11 means. And if any agent has the opportunity to reach out, like if there's any sign of like blood in the water or anything, they're going to hit up all your clients and be like, oh yeah, they're not going to be able to pay you. Like your agency's going under, like you need to find a new agent. And how the money flows in an agency, like we don't pay players, like they get paid and then they pay us. So it didn't even make sense, but it was interesting in the sense of like, hey, that's what people are going to do and say what they have to say. So then it went to the point where I was like, all right, well, now this company is not doing well. We're starting to lose clients because obviously it's bad for your image and stuff. So people are starting other agencies. So then me and my boss, it was interesting. He would start emailing me on my private email more, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I started to put it together, like what was going on. He was telling me to buy domain names. I was like, oh, okay, like we're obviously going to be starting a new agency. So that was a really good experience in the sense of like he had the opportunity to kind of choose me. And there's actually a pretty cool story where I found this out later from my friend who worked in HR, but I hope no one here has to go through a Chapter 11. But what happened in Chapter 11 is they hire an outside consulting firm to essentially say like, all right, because you're going to submit a plan to a court and you need to be like, yo, we're going to fire 40% of people or whatever. So the outside agency came in and said, oh, we need to cut everyone who has more than one assistant. So a lot of the top people at the company would have like 2 or 3 assistants. My boss had 2. So it was July 31st. I actually remember it, 2015. And it's weird how these dates stick in your head, but I guess it was traumatic. But I get to the office that day. I'm just minding my business. And then they called in 75 people from our company. It's like a 300-person company. They call in 75 people and they like in a room like this, and the bankruptcy consultants get up there and they just lay everybody off, and they don't provide severance, which is like very like screwed up to do. I was gonna cuss it. And then I was like, damn, all my friends just got fired. This is like very sad and stuff. And then my boss, who's super casual, he's seen a lot of things. He just calls me that night. He's like, oh yeah, like by the way, like you were supposed to get fired today, but like I just transferred you over to sports, so like you need to deal with that with HR tomorrow. I was like, oh, okay, sick, thanks. And then what I realized, like he could have very much let me go because he had his one assistant. It would have been out of his hands, and I would have been like, I understand, it's just like larger circumstances. But because he saw me doing the PowerPoints, like learning Excel, doing these newsletters every week, he was like, okay, this kid actually like gives a shit and actually wants to be here, so I'm going to kind of spare him. And then what I learned from my friend actually is he went in the meeting before they laid everyone off and saw my name on the list. So I was like this close to getting fired, like, which is actually like if he was late that day, I would have been fired, I guess. But regardless, he saw my name. He was like, no, Brandon's not getting fired. And they're like, no, we have to do it. He's like, no, it's not happening. And he just crossed my name off. And then like, that was the end of that. So that's a really good way to kind of view like your relationships are key in every industry you do, but especially ones like agencies, where agencies are really at the end of the day, a network of relationships. There's the brand of the agency, there's the infrastructure of the company. That's all nice. But at the end of the day, when you really kind of break it down, you're an athlete, I'm your agent, we have a relationship. I go out and try to bring you revenue, you pay me for doing that job. At the end of the day, like when you try to boil it down, that's what it really comes down to. So you need to really value it. If you want to work in the agency space, like your relationships are 100% key. So then in the middle of the night, we started to move all our stuff to this new office, started a whole new company called Catalyst. And then I was tasked with, oh, I'm no longer an assistant. Great job, Brandon. But now I have to do everything that no one would ever want to do. I had to buy furniture, which I have no taste in furniture. I didn't know what I would be buying. I had to build the company website. Hadn't done that. And that's an interesting transition where you kind of go from being an assistant where my net worth is tied to my boss. So you kind of have coverage in the sense of like, as long as your boss is there, you'll always have a job. So there is a safety net with that. And a lot of assistants do go through that, where it's really hard to get from under your boss's shadow, but it's also a very safe place to be. Then when you kind of go out on your own, I went to my boss and I created a PowerPoint, obviously. And I basically said, like, here's what I want my new role to be. Here's all the stuff I currently do, AKA stuff I never want to do again, i.e. Starbucks. And here's all the stuff I do on the side. And here's all the stuff I could do in my new role. And this is not how you negotiate any job or salary, but I started doing this job before getting a pay raise, which was not smart. Like, that's not how you want to negotiate anything. You want to get your salary before you start doing the job. But I was just, trying to get out of being an assistant. So I started doing this role. I did it for a year. I was able to finally get like a pay raise from there. And then I started doing the NBA player marketing. And what was kind of interesting is our head of NBA player marketing just left. So NBA player marketing, just to give you an overview, is just player marketing. So anything a player does off the court is in my purview. That's everything from your traditional sponsorships I've worked with companies like Robinhood, CashApp, Coinbase, Chipotle, State Farm, Levi's, Burberry, Born and Raised is actually one of the companies I've worked with. That's kind of what you do. And then you also like build media properties. So one of our guys, I used to work with De'Aaron Fox. He's super into gaming. I created and launched his YouTube channel. That got to like 255,000 subscribers. That was a really good experience. Again, no one ever said, Brandon, your job is to build a YouTube channel. But that's kind of what you do when you're doing everything off the court. So our head of that just left. And at that point, I was just doing like car dealership deals, which I've said throughout this trip, they're the worst deals to do because they don't get paid. You're just exchanging tickets. The players can sometimes be nice to the car, other times maybe not be nice to the car. And then you got to explain to a dealership why they weren't nice to your car. And it's just not good, but it's good to get your feet wet and kind of that. And then once he left, then I started doing paid deals for our guys. And then that just kind of grew. So that started in 2017, 2016, 2017 is when I started doing that. So I've been doing this for about 5 years now. And the guys I work with right now are guys like John Wall, Marcus Smart, Iman Shumpert, RJ Hampton, Romeo Langford, and Spencer Dinwiddie. And then my relationship with NIL has actually been very interesting. So when we do recruiting, it used to be like, oh, if you're a top player, sorry to keep using an example, but you're a top player. If you're a top player, oh, I'll be able to get you a deal with Chipotle, Coinbase, all these things. And what was unfortunate is a lot of agents would come in and kind of say that and not really be super, like, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they can kind of oversell you there. But what's actually really nice now is players can sign for NIL representation. So what that means is, like, I'm not signing with you as an agent because I would lose my eligibility, but I'm signing with you to handle my marketing for this year. So basically players get a trial run, which I think is good because it kind of can separate the people who are full of it, the people who actually do deals and stuff. I would say from my perspective, just in terms of how an agency works. So I mentioned how we make money off the contracts, 4%. Essentially what you get for the marketing is it's usually like 15 to 20%. So if you do a deal for 100 grand, whatever, you're going to take home, the HC will get 15 to 20% of that. So you obviously want to do a lot of these, and it can be a substantial amount of revenue for your company. But honestly, from that, when I'm looking at NIL, how many current college athletes have like the name notoriety to kind of do these large enough deals that it makes sense to spend my time on it? There's a handful. But what a lot of agencies are doing is, and it's actually really funny because a lot of agents are hitting me up now and being like, hey, can you do deals for this guy I'm recruiting? And then if he signs with me, I'll let you continue to do deals with him. And that's one of the worst offers I've ever heard, because it's like, so I have to do the deal, get the deal, give them to you, and then you get all the high reward. I was like, that's not really fair. But it's interesting because these agents now want to, the paradigm's flipped. So they now want to, oh, I need to bring deals to a guy to actually sign them, which I think is good because it actually shows who can actually do things. But it's very interesting because there's going to be a lot of people who are reading these headlines and a lot of players saying, oh, I'm this next guy, I should be getting these deals. Like the quarterback at Alabama, when it was like, oh, Nick Saban was like, oh, he's nearing 7 figures. So I talked to one of the companies that he worked with, and I know how much his deal was with them, and it was not near 7 figures. It was a very good deal. It was over 6 figures, but it wasn't near 7 figures. So I think Nick Saban there is doing a little like, kind of like pumping up the Alabama brand. Oh, go to Alabama, you'll be able to make $1 million in deals. Majority of guys aren't going to be able to get that just because there's an oversaturation. And if you think who has these large followings, it's very kind of few and far between. So from the agency perspective, I would say agencies are very particular about who they work with. So they're not going to sign everyone under the sun. I've had a lot of players approach me about it. And I operate in the sense of like, I think why I'm good at my job is I genuinely believe in our clients. Like Romeo Langford, someone I work with, one of the greatest guys. He loves Chipotle. I will go to bat to Chipotle with him every day of the week because this guy genuinely loves it. And he tells me these unique stories about it. If a guy doesn't really have that unique passion or something, or maybe he's not like, doesn't have like that marketability, I'm not going to feel like I could do the best job by them. And yeah, it may look cool for me to sign this player. Oh, Brandon signed 5 athletes, college athletes for NIL. That's great. But in 2 months when I haven't gotten them a deal, I think they're going to keep me around 50-50. And then my reputation gets kind of dragged through the mud. Oh yeah, Brandon didn't do anything for me. Like he just wanted to sign me, but then he's not going to actually like do any deals for me. So that's kind of how NIL is incorporating into my job. I think it's really good. I think the players should still be paid. I think it's kind of a substitute for that right now. And I think majority of guys are going to do like these group deals, which I'm personally not a fan of. And the deal with like the Gene Company, for example, we call that like the CPA deal. It's like cost per acquisition or whatever. And what the issue with that is I'm posting on my social media about it. And if no one buys it, then I'm giving you free exposure and free brand awareness. and there's no guaranteed compensation for me. So I can tell you, I do not do deals that do not have guaranteed compensation for the guy, unless he's a big fan and you get him product, but you're never exchanging something for just product. Just because if you're in the NBA, you probably have minimum 100,000 followers on Instagram, so the value you're getting is not equivalent to what you get from like free clothes or free shirts or something. Yeah, but kind of in the whole, what I kind of want to emphasize there is like the key takeaways I would say is like for the agency world, just be very pragmatic. I think people have a big misconception about it just because of what's out there in the media. You have Jerry Maguire, which is kind of dated now, and then you have Ballers, which Ballers, like they're financial advisors. They literally tell you your budget. They're not buying football teams and like going around like the city of Miami, like driving fast cars. That's not what a financial advisor does. If your financial advisor is doing that, I would get another financial advisor. And there's a lot of misconceptions like, oh, I see like an NBA agent sitting at the table with the top NBA pick. Oh, that must be a great job. He just gets to sit there. So many things are going on in that moment. He could be getting his client stolen. That has happened during drafts when your client switches agents because you're dropping in the draft and they switch to someone in that draft. The family could be upset about something. The player could be like, yo, why am I, you promised me top 15. Now I'm top 30. Now you have to explain that and stuff. So there's a lot of misconceptions about it. But I will say what is really rewarding about the space is number one, there's a very high upside in terms of there's no limit to what you can do because you're aligned with the players. So if you want to launch a podcast, if you want to launch a cryptocurrency, if you want to do a deal with Chipotle, if you want to have a YouTube, you literally can do whatever you want. You're not hamstrung by, oh, this is an NBA thing, this is a NBA team thing. But also kind of understand like where there's high risk, where there's high reward, there's high risk. And at any given time, someone can just leave you. And it can be really unfortunate because there's players who I've talked to several times a week, almost every day. And then one day you hear he left the agency, he didn't text you, he didn't say goodbye or anything. It's literally like a breakup. And it's like, damn, it's sad. And then it's like you come across something on like social media, you're like, oh, I'm gonna send this to him. Oh, damn, we broke up. It's not that bad, but it's literally like a very like, it's personal relationship. So if you like working with people, it's a really good job. And if you really care and invested, and you're not driven by like the glamour or fame, because like I will say there are nice perks to the job. Like if we had a guy who was on the LA Clippers, I live in LA, he would leave tickets for me every game. So I would go to like probably 25 to 30 NBA games a year. That is cool. I'm not going to downplay that it's cool, but for how much I'm not going to cuss against stuff that you have to go through, it's not going to pay off long term. Like you're not going to be thinking about, oh, that free game I went to at Staples Center was so sick that I now have to go get the coffee, or one of our players rented a car and just said, hey, I'm leaving it at the airport, you figure it out. That happened before. So a lot that will get you burned out very quickly, but if you have an intrinsic motivation, like, yo, I really want to help these guys. My why is I love seeing a guy go from like a 19-year-old kid we recruit with their parents to starting a family and having kids and like seeing them grow and getting them the best opportunity to not only succeed during their career, but afterwards. That's what really excites me. And then also putting two and two together in terms of partnerships. So I work with Spencer Dinwiddie. He's super big into crypto. I got him a deal with Coinbase. That's what I call like a 1 + 1 = 3 partnership. That's not the kind of thing he'll post on Instagram. And everyone's like, oh, you're just a huge sellout for this. Everyone's being like, yeah, this makes sense. He loves crypto. He tried to tokenize his contract. So those would be like my main advice in the sports agency space. I think we can discuss some more in the breakout sessions, but that was kind of a not so brief background on my role and kind of how everything interacts.
Share a really quick, there's quite a few questions, so I don't think we'll get them in the Q&A. But what qualities do you think a great sport agent should have, and what you've seen in the industry?
Yeah, great qualities. You need to be hard-headed and like have perseverance. You're going to get told no a lot. I always say count your wins, not your losses. I couldn't tell you how many companies I reached out to about doing deals with our guys that I don't hear back from, or a deal doesn't work out. But again, the companies I listed are the result of me trying and persevering. Then also from that is your ability to network. That is actually something I will self-admit I'm not the best at. Just because I started out without having any connections, I was like, I'm going to do this by me. I'm going to only rely on myself. I don't want to have to ask others for favors. And that will get you to a certain point, but there's after a certain point, if you do have that network where you can be like, hey, like I would like to, like it's random, but I play basketball with this guy who's an ESPN reporter, and he knows, if you're an ESPN reporter who does like basketball news, you know all the agencies. So I was like, oh, I'm trying to talk to someone at that agency. Like, can you make that introduction? And boom, I was able to talk to that person within a week. That wouldn't have happened if I went like I'm going to email them on the website or try to go through LinkedIn or anything like that. So your ability to like persevere, and then your ability to just network and maintain relationships is what I'd say the most valuable qualities.
And did you share the LinkedIn story of how you got that?
Oh, I got the job on LinkedIn.
Yeah, how you found that person, like when you were applying for an internship.
Oh, yeah. So there was a job at Wasserman, which is one of the big agencies. And I wanted to work there. And what I did my senior year in January, I typed in Wasserman on LinkedIn, very simple. And I was like, okay, I don't know anyone there. That's what we call first degree contact. But the second degree contact, I knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's all you really need. So if I can give any one piece of advice to everyone here, don't apply on company websites, because that just goes into an abyss. It might feel good for you, like, oh, I spent all this time doing this cover letter. Not going to get really seen, especially in the smaller ones. I think CAA has a built-out portal where they do check that, but even so, like, you want to have a direct connection. So what you want to do is basically type in the company you want to work at, and then see, okay, I know this person, and then just ask your friend for an introduction to them. If they don't give it to you, they don't know the person well, which is actually very common on LinkedIn. You're connected with people you've never met and don't know at all. What you could do after that is then just send them a message, and don't be generic about it. Be really particular. Like, hey, I went, and if they went to Florida, or if you have some connection like that, always play that up, because people love thinking about their old college days. So anytime you bring up college, like people are like, oh, this is like me 10 years ago. What a great kid. I'll talk to him. But from there, you really want to have like a specific ask. So I have a lot of people who reach out to me and they just say like, hey, I think your job's cool. I'd love to connect. And that's just like, I get a lot of those, and that's just not unique. Like, you should have a very specific ask and be like, hey, I saw you did this. This is really cool. I would love to talk to you like this. And say for an informational interview, don't say it's for a job. People don't like that, because they don't want to be like, hey, I'm asking you for something. I mean, you may want to later on, but what you need to build is that relationship. So what I did that in January, got coffee with this guy. It's probably 20 minutes, wasn't anything major. I wrote a handwritten thank you note. And then in May, when I saw an opening for an internship, then I emailed them, hey, how have you been? I obviously checked in before that too, just to keep up the relationship. But then once I saw the opening, I was like, oh, hey, saw this cool job. I attached my resume. I think I would be great for this for XYZ reason. And then from that, he was like, oh yeah, I'll send it to the hiring manager, because he knows who's hiring for it. You just skip the whole abyss of the whole website, and you skipped like 80% of the hard part. That's not going to get you the job. But when you have a warm referral like that, that is really going to take you so much farther than just trying to reach out and do it at the harder way. So, and then I was able to interview for that and was able to get it. And it was a really good experience. And that's the LinkedIn story.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Well, we really appreciate you, Brandon. That was great.